lived a supersized me life. He was bigger than life itself and outlived life, even if he couldn't outpace it. We all have so many stories of Tony as a friend, neighbor, colleague, brother, grandpa, and husband. But I can only speak to him as a father. He was a great man, but a man with some contradictions. A simple man, yet an often deep philosophical thinker, with firm moral convictions, yet he had an uncanny ability to offend total strangers. He was a man widely known as the king of E&S, excess and surplus liability. He was the top of his field, yet he's most proud of being Captain Litter. As a father, he always gave us enormous independence, yet there was an unspoken understanding of severity for not walking the line. To me, he was an amalgamation of Jackie Gleason and Benny Goodman, Dr. Cliff Huxtable and Archie Bunker, Jack Nicklaus and Joe DiMaggio, Chivas Regal and Johnny Walker Red, Fred Flintstone and Homer Simpson, Ralph Brest and the Unknown Comic, Captain James T. Kirk and Denny Crane. He loved playing and coaching sports, Scotch and water, Yankees and the Giants, history both real and imagined, grilling in the yard and mama's homemade cooking, Ronald Reagan and Fox News, very first, eating and watching Man vs. Food, probably eating while watching Man, getting comped in Atlantic City, and discussing his winnings. I had to explain to him what winnings were. It's when you go home with less than what you think you won. He felt passionate about America, and most of all, he loved his family and never hid his pride when it came to his children and his grandchildren. He didn't walk down the center. He believed in picking sides, good versus evil, a good story versus a story, conservative versus liberal, the importance of being right but not righteous, winning versus losing, having unwavering values versus what people like to do is have an ever-changing view of self-interest. The only time he liked the center was when he was the center of it. That was the center of attention. He always loved that. He was the cool dad, the funny dad, the dad all my friends wanted to hang out with. Hey, you want to come over? Is your dad going to be there? For me, he was an inspiration, a teacher, a trailblazer, a king and an ace in a land that stood on 17. He was the big man, swivel hips Boba, the unstoppable Bronx hook, the leader, a mentor, a comic, a genius, a showman, and a family man. As a father of three myself, I can only hope to be half as good of a father as he was to me. If I am, my kids, like me, will be amongst the luckiest in the world. I'd like to introduce Jonathan. In the words of my father, I'm going to say two things. Jonathan, it's very important that you don't embarrass yourself.
Checking my flyer.
But secondly, and most importantly, it's very important that you don't embarrass me.
Oh, dear God.
Thank you, Michael. That was beautiful. I'm going to try to speak rather loud because I feel like that's what's most appropriate for an event celebrating the life of Tony Boba. I remember being 3 or 4 years old and for the first time realizing how good my grandfather was at commanding the attention of a room. He was kind of like the first celebrity that I'd ever met. Because every time I was around him, everyone was focused on him and his stories and his banter and his volume and everything about him. And I just wanted to be just like him. I really did. And cut to 20 years later, I'm a storyteller and a comedian and a stay-at-home politician and a public speaker. These are the things that I like the most about myself, and these are the things that I got from my grandfather. My grandma and grandpa were my best friends growing up. I had a lot of trouble relating to other kids because I was so concerned with being like an adult. And the best adults that I knew were my parents and my grandparents. So when other kids were talking about stickers and circles or whatever kids talk about, I was more interested in talking about Keno and Christy Todd Whitman. While I was still learning to be a little kid, my grandma and grandpa were there for me to watch me grow down, if you will. I remember being younger, and there was one instance in which grandma and grandpa came to my house, and grandpa was joking around the entire day about how he was going to be moving in with us. I'm sure it had something to do with him making fun of his wealth or something to that effect. And I remember being so excited that I was going to be living with grandma and grandpa now, and I was planning all the fun things we were going to do together. I remember one of those cool things being that now grandma would be able to pick me up from school instead of me taking the bus home, which in hindsight wasn't as fun for you as I remember it. And as they were leaving to go to Red Bank, I remember my mom breaking the news to me that grandpa was just joking, and I just cried, because I wanted to be around him, and I wanted to be around grandma all the time. And that never really faded. I had the fortune of seeing him just a little under 2 weeks ago, and he was still commanding. This man could make best friends in a public bathroom. How it was possible, but he still made friends. My girlfriend Emily, it was the second time that he had met her when we saw him 2 weeks ago, and he was already rubbing his hands on a cold glass and placing them on her face, like, and in that moment, I realized that I spent so much of my life trying to be an adult, trying to be him as an adult, and realizing that he was still a kid. He was still the same kid, who entertained his classmates at Cardinal Hayes and Iona and was and essentially the mascot of his army company, from what I understand about the stories from him. And
why'd you tell him what it was?
Sorry?
Do you know what the mascot or the...
Oh, I don't remember. Would you like to?
Dickie Bird.
There we go.
He was mortified.
That's fantastic. I do remember the story of him having to give his gas mask to one of his fellow servicemen because he was, I believe, maybe too scared to go into. There we go. It's still there for him. And I realized that he was still a kid, and it's funny because now that I'm an adult, I'm realizing that there's still a lot of things that I need to learn about being more like him and more childlike and more willing to accept people and entertain people and just want to be with them and make them laugh. My heart goes out to all of us today, obviously. My grandmother, who was his confidant and comrade and closest friend. On a separate note, if anyone here knows a computer technician, Grandma's computer screen is covered in red ink from trying to fix the online obituary. Just side, you can talk to me afterwards. Wrote his own obituary. That seems perfect, doesn't it? And my heart goes out to my mother and her brothers. He always made it abundantly clear all the time how incredibly proud he was of his family. You know, a lot of the things that I ended up learning about him, I had to learn from my parents and from Grandma, because not only were some of the stories that he told me rather inaccurate, the things he wanted to talk about the most were how proud he was of his kids, and how proud he was of me and my brother and all of the grandkids. I'm proud to be the son of his favorite daughter. And my heart goes out to the rest of us here. It's interesting because I realized in the moment of grief where I found out that he had passed, that the feeling that was the most overwhelming was the jarring sensation of the permanence of his passing. I just never thought that it would happen. It was just so filled with life that it just never seemed like something that was going to go away. And that really tore me up. And being here today, and being here with all of you, my family and my friends, made me realize that he hasn't gone away, that he's present in all of us, and will always remain with us as long as we remember to be charitable and loving and honorable and take care of one another and make it a point to make people smile and laugh as frequently and often as we can, because he realized that that was the secret to life, and it's why he spent most of his life, if not all of it, extremely happy and extremely blessed. He's the reason that I'm talking in front of you today. He's the reason I didn't fill up on bread before I got up here. And he's ultimately the reason that I'm proud to be the person that I am today. So I hope for the rest of the day, when we're all sharing our stories about Tony, and don't worry about getting all the details right, because he never did. I would like you all to find the Tony Bobo within you today, because he is a part of you, and that part of your heart that he's permanently in is never going to fade. I really appreciate you allowing me to talk about my hero, my perfect friend.